Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something pretty huge. I mean, the idea that our universe might not be, just some random cosmic accident, but like an actual experiment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty wild thought, right?
Yeah.
Like flipping our whole perspective.
Yeah.
From thinking the universe is just pure chance.
Yeah.
To considering it as something that was intended.
Right, exactly. So we're going to be looking at this article called Scientists Find Traces in the Universe, the Cosmic Blueprint of Life, and the Possibility of a Grand Designer. It's got some pretty interesting ideas about, does the universe have a creator? Are these imperfections we see actually intentional? And even like the weird similarities between the structure of the cosmos and the human brain. It's a lot to unpack.
Definitely. These questions have been around for centuries, but now with all the advances in astrophysics and cosmology, we're starting to find some really interesting clues.
For sure. So let's start with the Big Bang. I mean, we all know it's the event that kicked off our universe.
Yeah.
But it's easy to forget just how amazing the result was. From that initial chaos, we got this incredibly ordered universe. It's like going from, a single fertilized egg to a full-blown human being.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. The human brain, with all its billions of neurons, comes from just one cell. And the universe, with its massive web of galaxies and stars and planets, it all came from that initial singularity. So it makes you wonder if there are some similar principles at work even at these wildly different scales.
It's like what makes the whole idea of a designed universe so fascinating. And that leads us to fine-tuning, right? This idea that the fundamental constants of nature, like the strengths of forces, the masses of particles, they all seem to be calibrated so precisely to allow for life. If any of these are just slightly off, we wouldn't even be here.
It's like a recipe. If you change the amount of flour or sugar in a cake, even a little bit, the whole thing can be a disaster. The universe is kind of like that too. For example, the article talks about this balance of matter and antimatter. In theory, the Big Bang should have created equal amounts of both, which would have led to, total annihilation, a universe with nothing but energy.
So no cake and no us. That's a bummer. But obviously matter won somehow. We're here talking about it.
Exactly. Right. It's like someone adjusted the recipe just a tiny bit more matter than antimatter. And that tiny difference was all it took to allow for stars, planets, and eventually life.
Wild. So the article highlights a few other examples of this fine-tuning. It mentions the strong nuclear force, the one that holds the nucleus of an atom together. If it were a bit weaker, atoms couldn't form. A bit stronger, and all the hydrogen would have fused into heavier elements. No fuel for the stars.
Exactly. And Dr. Hugh Ross, an astrophysicist, quoted in the article, he uses this argument to suggest there's a causal agent, basically a creator behind the universe. He points to how incredibly unlikely it is for all these fine-tuned parameters to just happen by chance.
And it's not just him. The article also talks about astrophysicist Willie Soon, who suggests the universe might be built on a complex mathematical blueprint, crafted by a great mathematician, as he calls it.
It's definitely a thought-provoking idea.
Right.
Makes you imagine some cosmic architect carefully tweaking these constants to create a universe that could support life.
It really does. But here's where things get even more interesting. What if these imperfections are on purpose? Like maybe a perfect universe where life could just evolve without limits wasn't what the creator wanted.
That's the imperfection by design concept.
Yeah.
And it brings up some pretty huge questions, like why would a creator build in these limitations? What purpose would they serve?
Yeah. The article uses the example of the star formation rate in our universe. Calculations show that a rate of about 27% would be best for life. But our universe is only forming stars at a rate of about 23%.
Like someone dialed it back a bit. The article suggests that maybe this slower rate is meant to stop life from evolving too quickly or becoming too powerful, too soon,
Like a built-in safety mechanism. I get it. It's like a pressure valve on a pressure cooker. But if we're talking about intentional design, then what about the motivation? Why even bother creating a universe, fine-tuning it for life, and then putting limits on it?
That's the million-dollar question. The article doesn't give any definite answers, but it does imply that maybe the answer is just beyond our current understanding. Like the motivations of a cosmic creator might just be too complex for us to grasp right now.
I see what you mean. It's like trying to explain quantum physics to a dog. They just wouldn't get it. But even if we can't fully understand why, we can still be amazed by how. It's all just so ingenious, so precise. The universe's design is mind-blowing.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder if our desire to learn and explore to understand the universe, is it somehow connected to that same intelligence?
Yeah.
Maybe we're not just watching this cosmic experiment, but playing a part in it. a part of this grand unfolding of consciousness.
Okay, now you're really blowing my mind.
Yeah.
But I like it. It's like the universe is this giant puzzle box,
Yeah.
and we're slowly putting the pieces together. And remember the parallels between the structure of the universe and the human brain that we talked about earlier? Could those similarities be more than just coincidence?
Yeah, that's another piece of the puzzle worth thinking about. Both the brain and the universe, they show this incredible complexity that comes from simple beginnings. They both have these huge networks of interconnected nodes, neurons in the brain, and galaxies in the universe, and the ratio of active to inactive matter. It's surprisingly similar in both.
It's almost like the universe is built like a giant brain. And if that's true, it raises some really profound questions about consciousness and what role life plays in the cosmos. Like, are we really just tiny, insignificant specks in a vast, indifferent universe? Or are we actually key parts of some cosmic intelligence that's becoming aware of itself?
It's a pretty amazing thought, isn't it? And it challenges us to completely rethink our place in the universe. Instead of feeling isolated and alone, we might be part of something much bigger. A vast web of consciousness that spans the entire cosmos.
It's humbling and awe-inspiring all at once, and it leads to so many more questions. If the universe really is a conscious entity, what does that mean for us? What role do we play in this cosmic story?
Those are questions philosophers and scientists have been debating for centuries. And while we might never have all the answers, the journey of trying to find them is what makes it so fascinating. It's about pushing the boundaries of what we know, expanding our consciousness, and embracing the mystery and wonder of it all.
Okay, so we've talked about the balance of matter and antimatter, the strong force too. What other cosmic dials seem to be set just right for life to even exist?
Well, the article mentions this delicate balance between gravity and the masses of like quarks and electrons, those tiny particles that make up atoms. If their masses were even a little bit different, or if gravity itself was stronger or weaker, atoms might never have formed.
So no atoms, no stars, no planets, no us. It really does seem like a lot of things had to go exactly right. It almost makes you wonder if it's even statistically possible for all this to happen just by chance.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of the fine-tuning argument, isn't it? The chances of all these factors aligning perfectly, just randomly, it's mind-boggling. The article compares it to winning the lottery like hundreds of millions of times in a row.
Wow, that really puts it into perspective. Okay, so we've got the matter-antimatter balance, the strong force, and the masses of those tiny particles. Anything else?
Don't forget about dark energy, the mysterious force that's making the universe expand faster and faster. It turns out the density of dark energy is super important too.
But wait, didn't we talk about how the star formation rate in our universe isn't ideal for life? Wouldn't more dark energy mean even faster expansion and less star formation?
That's a great point. You're absolutely right. The article did mention that study that calculated the perfect star formation rate for a universe full of life, something like 27%.
Huh.
But what we observe is closer to 23%. And that's where things get even more interesting.
Because it could be another example of that intentional imperfection, right? Like maybe whoever or whatever is running this cosmic show decided to slow things down a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe a slower rate of star formation was needed to prevent life from, evolving too quickly or taking over too soon.
Yeah.
Like a way to make sure the experiment unfolds at a manageable pace.
I see. Like a safety valve on a pressure cooker. But if we're talking about deliberate design, it makes you wonder about the motivation behind it all. Why go through all this trouble to create a universe, fine-tune it for life, and then intentionally put limits on it?
That's the big question, isn't it? The article doesn't really give us any clear answers, but it kind of suggests that maybe the answer is just beyond our understanding right now. Like maybe the motivations of a cosmic creator are just too complex for us to grasp. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it. Like trying to explain quantum physics to a dog. Their brains just aren't wired for it. But even if we can't fully understand why, we can still appreciate the how, the sheer ingenuity and precision of it all. It's pretty amazing.
For sure. And it makes you think about our own desire for knowledge, our drive to understand the universe. Could that be a reflection of that same intelligence, Maybe we're not just passive observers in this cosmic experiment, but active participants. Like we're part of this incredible unfolding of consciousness.
Okay, now you're really getting me thinking about all this. It's like the universe is a giant puzzle box, and we're slowly figuring out how to open it. And remember those parallels between the structure of the universe and the human brain? We talked about that earlier. Could those similarities be more than just a coincidence?
Yeah, definitely something to consider. Both the brain and the universe, they start simple, but become incredibly complex. They both have these huge networks of connections, neurons in the brain and galaxies in the universe. And even the ratio of active to inactive matter, it's surprisingly similar in both.
It's almost like the universe is structured like a giant brain, If that's true, it raises some pretty profound questions about consciousness and the role of life in the cosmos. Like, what if we're not just tiny, insignificant specks in this vast and different universe? What if we're actually important parts of some cosmic intelligence that's becoming aware of itself?
That's a pretty wild thought, right? And it kind of forces us to rethink our whole understanding of our place in the universe. Instead of feeling isolated and alone, we might be part of something much bigger, this interconnected web of consciousness that spans the entire cosmos.
It's both humbling and awe-inspiring at the same time, and it opens up even more questions. If the universe really is conscious, what does that mean for us? What's our part in this whole cosmic story?
Big questions that philosophers and scientists have been wrestling with forever. And while we may never have all the answers, just searching for them is what makes it so fascinating. It's all about pushing the boundaries of what we know, expanding our own consciousness, and embracing the mystery and the wonder of it all.
So we've covered a ton in this deep dive.
Yeah.
Everything from that wild idea of fine-tuning to the possibility of a multiverse. It seems like the universe is just full of these mysteries that really challenge what we think we know about reality. But the article doesn't just leave us with these big philosophical questions. It also points out some really exciting research that could actually give us some solid evidence to back up these crazy ideas.
That's right. Scientists aren't just sitting around thinking about what a designed universe would mean. They're actively looking for clues that can explain the origins and nature of the cosmos. And some of this research is truly groundbreaking.
Yeah, the article mentions the search for primordial gravitational waves. What are those exactly, and why are they so important?
Imagine the Big Bang like a giant cosmic bell that was rung at the moment of creation. The sound waves from that bell would ripple through space-time. And those ripples are what we call primordial gravitational waves.
So like echoes from the very beginning of the universe.
Exactly. And if we could detect those echoes, it would be like having a time machine. We could look back to that first fraction of a second after the Big Bang.
Yeah.
We could learn about the initial conditions that shaped everything, and maybe even find evidence to support the idea of a designed or fine-tuned cosmos.
That's amazing. But how do we even detect these ancient ripples in space-time?
It's a huge technological challenge. But scientists are developing some incredibly sensitive instruments to try to do just that. The article talks about this satellite called Lightbird that's supposed to launch in 2032. It's designed specifically to pick up the faint signals of these primordial gravitational waves.
So in a few years, we might actually have data that could prove or disprove the idea of fine-tuning from the very beginning. That's pretty exciting. But the article also mentions another interesting area of research: axions and dark matter.
Right. Axions are these hypothetical particles that scientists think could make up a big chunk of dark matter. You see, we know dark matter exists because of how it affects gravity, but we've never actually seen it directly.
So if we could find axions, we'd not only confirm they exist, but also solve one of the biggest mysteries in astrophysics.
Exactly. And get this. The article suggests that those supermassive black holes at the centers of galaxies might be the key to detecting axions.
That seems kind of counterintuitive. Wouldn't black holes make it harder to observe things?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah.
But some theories suggest that specific interactions between axions and black holes could create signals we could actually detect. It's cutting-edge stuff, but if it works, it would be huge for our understanding of both dark matter and the early universe.
We've talked a lot about fine-tuning and the possibility of a cosmic designer, but what about dark energy? We know it's pushing the universe to expand faster, but the article hints at research trying to understand its role in shaping everything.
One of the big questions is whether the density of dark energy is constant or if it's changing over time. If it's changing, that could have huge implications for the future of the universe and the evolution of life.
So if we can figure out how dark energy behaves, it could give us more clues about whether the universe is truly fine-tuned for life or if it's just one possibility out of many in a multiverse.
Exactly. And there's another line of research that's really fascinating. Comparing the large-scale structure of the universe, what we call the cosmic web, to the structure of neural networks in the human brain.
The brain-cosmos connection again. We touched on the similarities earlier, but how are scientists actually studying this?
They're using these complex computer simulations to analyze how galaxies are distributed and how energy flows through the cosmic web. And they're finding some interesting patterns that look a lot like the networks in our brains.
So it's not just a metaphor, but a real quantifiable similarity in structure.
That's what the research suggests. And if it turns out the universe is organized in a way that reflects consciousness, it would completely change how we see our place in all of this. It would suggest that we're not just watching, but we're part of a universe that's becoming self-aware.
It's pretty mind-blowing. And it brings us back to that core question. Is the universe the result of random chance or deliberate design? What are your final thoughts?
Well, the evidence for fine-tuning is pretty strong. The chances of the universe's parameters being just right for life are incredibly slim. But in the end, it comes down to what each person believes. The great thing about science is that it keeps pushing our understanding further. With every new discovery, we get a deeper appreciation for how complex and amazing the universe is.
Well said. This deep dive has definitely challenged my own thinking and opened me up to new possibilities. Who knows what we'll find out in the future? Maybe someday we'll have absolute proof that the universe was designed, or maybe we'll find out it's even more bizarre and wonderful than we can imagine. Either way, the exploration itself is what makes it so exciting.
I totally agree. The universe is full of mysteries, and as humans, we're naturally curious. We want to unravel those mysteries, and in doing so, maybe we'll learn something profound about ourselves along the way.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the universe. Keep those minds open, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring.